Welcome to Register It, the podcast of the Catholic Register. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside associate editor Quinton Amundson and reporter Luke Mandato. Where normally we'd be taking a look beyond the headlines of our stories from the past week, today we bring you a special episode of Registered, and with it a special guest. Joining us is Jesuit Father John O'Brien, director of the Martyrs Shrine in Midland, Ontario. It's a place I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with. Maybe you're one of the hundreds of thousands over the years who've made the pilgrimage to the shrine. Thanks for joining us, Father John.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Mickey and Quinton and Luke. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, the reason we have this special episode, it's to mark a special anniversary this year at the shrine. Two special occasions, actually. The 100th anniversary since the opening of the Martyrs Shrine in June 1926, 400 years since the Canadian martyr John de Brébeuf began his ministry in the Wendat territory near what is now Midland on the shores of Georgian Bay. Father John and the Shrine have joined with us at the Register in publishing a commemorative magazine to mark these anniversaries. And I've got to tell you, what an absolute pleasure it's been in putting this together. The magazine is called Missions and Martyrs, and we'll have these ready early next week, just in time for the Shrine's Centennial Gala on June 3rd. And on June 5th, I believe it is, it'll be available in the Martyrs Shrine gift shop. So enough of this shameless plug for the Register and our products, because it's the Canadian Martyrs Shrine we're here to celebrate. Father John, I imagine it's been a pretty busy year for you so far, and I can't imagine it's not going to get any, less busy. So can you tell us what's been taking up your time so far this year?
Well, the winter was very busy doing more missions ad extra. Outside of the shrine, we had the tail end of our relic tours. So this was a historic bringing of the major relics of St. John de Brébeuf and some of his companions out of the shrine and to Canadian destinations. So we had over 60 events all across Canada, coast to coast. This was mainly during the Jubilee year of 2025, and it entered into January. And it was just sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity to bring our Canadian martyrs to the Canadian people. And these were devotional events primarily, and just promoting healing and reconciliation and prayer and awareness of the story of our martyrs. And so that took up a lot of time, that and retreats to dioceses and priests. And then here back at the shrine, we've just been getting the site ready for our major celebrations of 2026.
Yeah, and the shrine, the grounds opened just recently, so we'll get into that a little bit. But from here, I think I'm going to turn it over to Quinton and Luke to ask a few questions, because between the two of them, I believe they probably spoke to you for all 9 stories that between them they put into this magazine. So obviously you're very familiar with these two, and you might even be a little tired of talking to these guys. I don't know, but Luke, one of the stories you wrote about was about the thousands who make a pilgrimage to Martyrs Shrine each year.
That's right. First of all, thanks, Father John, so much for joining. It's great to have you, and really appreciate you taking the time and spending it here with us. And hopefully not too tired of us, as Mickey said, but it's been a pleasure. Yes, and Mickey, as you mentioned, we have spoken extensively about some of the pilgrimage experiences. And I think that the first thing I wanted to ask Father John was about this sort of double anniversary we're celebrating this year, the 100th anniversary of the shrine itself and the 400th of the Jesuits' arrival in Huronia. I wanted to ask, what does this convergence mean for the shrine, and how do you see it sort of shaping and impacting the pilgrimage experience this year, whether in numbers or spiritual impact?
Sure, and I'm not tired at all of speaking with you guys. It's been a pleasure for me as well, as we have delved into all these extraordinary stories of our church history here in Canada, and the magnificent magazine product that is resulting from it as well. The anniversaries are a convergence. The 100th anniversary we're celebrating is 100 years of the Martyrs Shrine per se, because it opened in 1926. So for the last 100 years, we've counted basically that millions of Canadians and also international people have visited the shrine in this past century. When we count that about 100,000 people visit the shrine every summer, that adds up very quickly to many, many people whose lives have been impacted by the story of the martyrs, the graces of the sacred site, and just the role that the National Shrine has played in the life of the church in our country. And then it just so turned out that 1626 was the year that Brébeuf, St. John de Brébeuf, arrived from Quebec to the land of the Hurons and founded this first Christian mission outside of Quebec. And it was the beginning of the founding of the first native Christian community, what we sometimes like to call Canada's early church, or the first Christians of Canada. And thinking about it that way, we realize what an impact, what a legacy that has been for 400 years. So this convergence, we're celebrating it in different ways and celebrating those two anniversaries together. And in terms of the impact on the shrine, we're seeing it is going to influence the pilgrim experience at the shrine. We expect to have a lot of numbers of pilgrims come to Midland this summer. And I should probably say also the shrine is and has always been just a seasonal shrine. We're actually only open for 6 months of the year, from the beginning of May to Thanksgiving weekend in October. So it's a very intense half year where we welcome over 35 large ethnic-based Catholic pilgrimages and just countless other parish groups and school groups and families and so on. So during the season ahead, we are going to be building, I think, upon the momentum of last year. Last year was the Jubilee year for the Universal Church, and during all of last year, the shrine was a designated official pilgrimage site. So we saw a huge uptick. We had over 100 parishes, mainly from the Archdiocese of Toronto, but also from beyond, and a few diocesan pilgrimages from Peterborough and Hamilton, a few other places came here. So that put the shrine on everyone's radar, I think, in a new way. And a lot of Canadian Catholics want to make a visit to the shrine part of their annual summer schedules and plans. And from a spiritual point of view, we just know as Catholics that anniversaries, like jubilees, like feast days, when these celebrations converge and come up, we just have a sort of a quiet awareness that these are occasions of special blessing for the church in general and for the individuals who come. Now, you can come to the shrine at any time and receive the plenary indulgence. That's a gift that the popes gave to Martyrs Shrine, first 400 years ago, and then it was renewed by John Paul II. So any year, people can come visit the shrine and receive that special grace. But it also converges with the anniversaries that we're celebrating this year.
Yeah. Well, speaking of John Paul II, of course, one of the most famous pilgrimages to the shrine was the 100,000 strong who were on hand for the papal visit in 1984. And I know Quinton took a look at that special time for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Father John. I thought I'd ask you about one of the rare stories in the magazine of which you were not interviewed. We gave you a break this time. We spoke to some of your fellow Jesuits and a couple of the lay faithful who you provided contact information for. I'm very grateful for that. But they were all talking about the aura of the Pope that day, both in these very intimate one-on-one encounters and when he was addressing well over 80,000 people, and everybody spoke so glowingly about the ripple effects that lingered far beyond 1984. What do you think are the fruits from that visit that still resonate today?
I think anyone over 40 or 50 years old who was growing up in Canada 42 years ago remembers that papal visit in general. It was the first time a pope set foot on Canadian soil. What a big deal it was. Yeah. And it was lengthy. It was a 12-day tour across Canada. He gave over 30 major addresses. So although he visited Canada a few times after 1984, namely for World Youth Day in 2002, that papal visit, I think, really revitalized the church, and we felt included in the universal church. Some of the ways I think the legacy of that visit have continued are number one, young people. So although it wasn't in Midland, in Montreal, there was one gathering at Montreal's Olympic Stadium, and tens of thousands of young people gathered. And I think that was in some ways a precursor to the World Youth Days that began shortly after that, or even around that time, but they started to take off and became a lasting legacy of the pontificate of John Paul II. That was part of the visit to Canada. And then, of course, the other impact was what it meant for the indigenous people of Canada. At Martyrs Shrine, he began his address with the traditional Huron word of greeting, che, which means it's greetings. And the ceremony that followed was a real inclusion of the indigenous Christian people into the life of the church. He highlighted the role of Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, who was not yet canonized. And then he mentioned, quoting St. Paul's letter to the Romans about the love of God being basically inseparable from us, and also the letter to the Corinthians, just the power of God's love to overcome all obstacles, and how this had inspired the martyrs to come here and do what they did. But then he also highlighted some of the indigenous Christian leaders of the St. Marie mission 400 years ago, namely Joseph Chiwatenhwa and his wife Marie Aonetta, these lay leaders of the early church, and he called them worthy of emulation. He said that the way they adopted the faith and began to evangelize their own people in their own ways was inspired and an example for us all. Yeah. And he also mentioned how Pope Urban VIII had designated Martyrs Shrine as a place of pilgrimage back in the year 1644, and had renewed this as Pope for modern times. So all of these streams of endorsement, of blessing, of reference, of uniting people, they were unprecedented at the time, and they continue to reverberate. People who were there talk about it, especially in this local area, in the surrounding areas around Midland, but also many visitors who come here will still talk about that keystone event that took place.
Yeah, there's just so many stories to be told, over those 400 years. And of course, you really hit the nail on the head with, Joseph Chiwatenhwa and Aonetta, his wife. They often, and the whole Wendat people, they so much get lost in the telling of the stories, but that is starting to change now. And I know this just from when we were first putting this magazine together and we had our preliminary talks, and it was so obvious your reverence for Joseph Chiwatenhwa and just the Wendat people and their history with the shrine. So, of course, we had Quinton talk to you about that.
Yes, thank you, Mickey, and I have to agree with you. Your passion and your admiration really rang through during our phone call, Father O'Brien. And what I think also stands out is the fact that you had, the likes of Brébeuf and so many of the early martyrs. They viewed him as really the apostle among the apostles. Like, his zeal just was really inspiring to them. There's so many Canadian Catholics that do not know this great disciples history. What do you think Canadian Catholics should really know about him, and what should we learn from him to really take to our daily lives?
The more we read about Joseph Chiwatenhwa, the more we realize, or at least the more I'm realizing, what a catalyst figure he was for the planting of the faith. And we see that in his life itself. So he was a young man, a husband, a fur trader. He was among the first of the Wendat to be baptized, to ask for baptism. And he was a friend of John de Brébeuf's, and Father Brébeuf was the one who baptized him and then married him and his wife, Marie. And then he was the first Indigenous person to do the silent retreat, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, which he did for 8 days with such complete devotion. He was somehow transformed very profoundly. And after his retreat, produced a prayer to the Creator God that has come down to us today. And it's one of the most powerful prayers that sort of combines an Indigenous sensibility about God and God's love and also a commitment to Jesus. And then he becomes this man on fire. It's like the Holy Spirit was really using him and implanting his, something in his heart, because he then goes ahead of the Jesuits and goes village to village. And the Jesuits kind of take a back seat and watch with great wonder and awe and admiration. And they call him their firebrand, this Christian flame. And he goes and he explains to his own people in their own language why the gospel of Jesus Christ is a credible revelation of the Creator God. And it's only after that that the Wendat people really come forward in numbers to ask to be baptized as Christians, by the hundreds and then by the thousands, becoming effectively a Christian nation. And Joseph Chiwatenhwa and his wife are then sort of commissioned to be leaders of the main Christian village of the Wendat nation. And he meets other saints along the way. Saint Charles Garnier, Jesuit missionary, writes about him in a letter saying, "After God, all of our hope was in this one man." And then the other quote I love is the one you referred to, Quinton, which is that he meets Saint Marie de l'Incarnation in Quebec one summer. And she is so impressed by him that she calls him in a letter the apostle with the apostles. So he's the apostle working with the Jesuit missionaries, to be sure. But he also is martyred. He also was killed, and it's unclear whether it was the traditional enemies of the Wendat who killed him, or if it was perhaps jealous members of his own people. But his body was found slain in a field, and after his death, the family members, his wife, his brother, they take up the mantle of leading the local Indigenous church. So it's not just Joseph Chiwatenhwa, but his whole family that was quite extraordinary. So I would say Martyrs Shrine is as much a shrine to the Wendat martyrs of Huronia as it is to the French Jesuit missionaries. And more we're honoring them here with the statues have been up for some time. But also we have something called our Indigenous Prayer Walk. You can pray a circuit on the shrine, stopping at the statues of St. Kateri Tekakwitha, Joseph Chiwatenhwa, our big new lookout platform that looks over the bay, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and so on, and pray the prayer of Joseph Chiwatenhwa.
Oh, that's just fascinating stories. And we can only tell so many in this magazine, but of course, the shrine itself, you're telling your own story. Luke, you spoke to Father John about this.
Yeah, this is a good one, Mickey. Father John, we were sort of joking the other day that even one of the articles in the magazine about these two new keepsakes being introduced seemed to have a high word count. These are sort of accessory pieces that I gave you a call for, and we had such a great chat about the history of these and what they hope to bring to the people celebrating this year. So those two keepsakes this year, the commemorative coin that's been minted, as well as a coffee table style photo book done by the shrine. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind these projects, what you hope they can symbolize this year, and even how maybe they can help carry these celebrations or even a memory of these celebrations this year into next year as well and beyond.
It was mainly because in addition to the spiritual legacy of celebrating keystone anniversaries, is we did want some kind of keepsake, tangible things that people can preserve and keep as a memorial of what's being celebrated here. So there's a long tradition of minting commemorative coins, and just because they last forever. So we have minted it turned out very beautiful. It's kind of a golden colored coin, quite large, larger than a toonie, And on one side, it shows Joseph Chiwatenhwa with John de Brébeuf. It's modeled after the famous stained glass window that's in Martyrs Shrine Church. It's called a sharing, and just representing really the partnership between the French and the indigenous, or the missionaries and the Wendat. And that's celebrating the 400 years. On the other side of the coin is the iconic image of the Martyrs Shrine Church, and that's celebrating the 100 years. So this is a coin that we're making available to our benefactors, and it's also available at the gift shop at the shrine. And as for the commemorative coffee table book, the shrine is very beautiful, and I'm always conscious of what Pope Benedict once said, that what's the most credible aspect of the church's presence in the world, to the world, is number one, the witness value of its saints and saintly figures. That's, a mystery. It's incongruous, but it shines like a light to the whole world. And secondly, it's the beauty. It's the beautiful legacy of everything that's Catholic to the world, starting with our art and our architecture and so on. And so the idea of a coffee table book in its mundane and sort of simplicity is, well, here's a vehicle that will showcase both the lives of our saints, and our saints are great, and also the beauty of Martyrs Shrine. So a book had been made maybe 40 or 50 years ago. That was the last time such a book had been written. And we wanted to have one half a century later that showcases the shrine as it exists today. So it includes a number of essays on the history of the martyrs, history of the shrine, and then plenty of photos, both black and white historical photos dating back through the 100 years of shrine's history, and then full color photos that profile the shrine in all of its glory.
Well, it's not just the shrine and ourselves at the Register telling the Canadian martyrs and the shrine story. A good friend of the Register, Kevin Dunn, he's using his filmmaking talents to tell a story that, as he put it, has never been properly told. So, Quinton, you spoke with Kevin about that.
Thank you very much, Mickey. It's always a pleasure, Father John, to talk to Kevin Dunn, and I know his new documentary of Blood and Water is really filling him with a lot of joy as a creator. It just is a really meaningful project for him. I'm very interested in what have you enjoyed about the collaboration with him, and what really intrigues you about what you already know about this documentary that will likely come out in 2028.
Just, I would say, Kevin Dunn's enthusiasm and his partners, his co-producers, Nicholas Papalardo and others, in reaching far. Like, they've gathered a coalition of advisors and supporters for this project that includes bishops from across the two countries, and also the two shrines, because there is another shrine to the martyrs in New York, Auriesville, commemorating Isaac Jogues, René Goupil, Jean de Lalande, 3 of the 8 martyrs who were from here but died there. So the two shrines. So there's a very large scope for this project. Calling it a docudrama. It'll have parts of it that are dramatized with actors and recreations of the main scenes of the story. But then it's also a multimedia project. So it'll have a feature film quality to it, but also there will be side projects that will be telling the story of Joseph Chiwatenhwa and the Wendat martyrs of Huronia. There will be telling stories of the French Jesuit missionaries. It'll, in our day and age, we can purpose parts of film projects to be on YouTube, to have multiple applications. So it fits into the overall mission that we have of promoting awareness of our story in Canada and beyond, to the universal church as well, of the missionaries and martyrs. And I think it will also contribute in the long run to the ongoing process of reconciliation, truth and reconciliation, as we see that, especially the role that these Wendat Christians played even after the destruction of Huronia. So that's part of the stories, is the tragic deaths of the missionaries and many of the Wendat Christians and their dispersal around North America, really, but how they brought their Christian faith with them and seeded the ground of the continent that made future missionary efforts easier than what our French missionaries experienced here. There weren't martyrdoms. There wasn't the conflict and resistance, and everything that was sacrificed here in Huronia was the cost, was the deposit, was the reason that later unfolded through, you might call it a paschal mystery, like experience of a passion, a death, but also a resurrection on the part of the French and the Wendat that resulted in the flourishing of Christianity in many, many ways. So we're excited for the film project. It's a big one. We're support raising for it. There's been film trailers made, reenactments already done, but Kevin Dunn and his team are scouring the continent looking for funding to make this dream a reality. And at the Shrine, we will be a hub that showcases in many ways this film. And then there'll be broadcast opportunities as well, and maybe even theatrical opportunities as well for it.
And you know Kevin's going to do a good job, because he's done, well, Quinton especially has been doing stories about Kevin for many years now and all of his projects, and they've always been very well received and just so well done. So that's another thing we're looking forward to seeing. So. Wow, you know, Father John, we could probably sit here all day and talk about the Shrine, about the martyrs. I think we're going to leave it to the magazine, to your coffee table book, to Kevin Dunn, what he's got to do. And possibly, how about you people get up there and see the grounds? I know I've been bugging Luke about this for a while. You know, in his 22 or 23 years, he's still not been up there. I guess he wasn't one of the lucky ones who got to do the school pilgrimage like we used to back in our day, where every class we're going up to the Martyrs Shrine and that. So, and in fact, myself, I probably haven't been up there in about 15 or 20 years or so. So this is certainly re-piqued my curiosity. You know, after I have been up there a number of times in the years, so possibly there's another trip in there. So what can we expect this year? You know, just and actually, what can we expect in the next 100 years? Would you be able to look into your crystal ball to tell us what if 4 people were sitting talking about this 100 years from now? Any such grandiose plans?
Well, the Shrine will always be there to commemorate the martyrs. And if a visitor were to come from the GTA, we're only an hour and a half, 2 hours from the GTA, and they arrive. There's the Martyrs Shrine. There's 150 acres of monuments and outside altars, gardens, stations of the cross, restaurant, reflection pools. And that's the Shrine. And then across the highway from the Shrine is the recreated historic site of St. Marie among the Hurons. That was the major Jesuit mission 400 years ago, which has an incredible museum. And you can walk where they walked and also see the grave sites of St. John de Brébeuf and St. Gabriel Lallemant that are there. And then a third site to visit, not too far down the highway, is St. Ignace, which was where the martyrdoms took place, which I believe is possibly Canada's, if not North America's, holiest ground, just because of the blood of the martyrs being the seed of the church. Well, it was shed there. And so there's all kinds of forms of pilgrimage that can happen here and will continue to happen in the future. And this year, a pilgrim can expect several major celebrations. So we have a big invitation to all Canadians to come up on June 27th, Saturday. That's our big anniversary mass, outdoor mass, with Archbishop Donald Bolin coming from Regina, and concerts, and it's a big family-friendly day, June 27th. We're having musical concerts in the church in August, And we had a Leahy, the Canadian Celtic band Leahy, was going to come in June. We've actually pushed that concert back to September, but we're hoping to have it on the Feast of the Canadian Martyrs, September 26th. So otherwise, I'd say just check out the website of Martyrs Shrine, see all the many events that are planned all throughout the year. There's so many different ones representing, really, the shrine represents the whole church in microcosm. Such a beautiful variety of people who come. So all are welcome to come this summer and every year for the next 100 years. We'll all be a bunch of really old men.
Yeah.
Years from now.
So, Luke, there's your invitation on June 27th there, so you can get up. Maybe I'll make it easier for you, and I'll assign you to go and cover the story. How's that? Or you might want to go up and when Leahy's there. I don't know if you know much of their music, but they're quite a spectacular band. So that might be my next one going to. So, well, and what you mentioned the website, Father John. Maybe you could let people know what it is to look for.
Our website is just martyrshrine.com, and everything is there. Everything you might need to read or see or plan, and we're open 7 days a week, and we have multiple masses throughout the day. And confessions are heard around the clock here. And there's the opportunity for tours and for devotions. And those are all listed on the website, the different hours of each of those things.
Okay. And you can always keep on top of that at our website as well, catholicregister.org, where we'll also be pointing you to where you can purchase Missions and Martyrs, which, as I've said all along through this, we're really excited to launch that next week. So again, catholicregister.org for that and for all your Catholic news out there. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us, Father John especially. This has been fantastic. We're really looking forward to the gala coming up, which is June 3rd. And then the magazine will be available in the gift shop as of June 5th, and you can always order it at catholicregister.org. So please take a look at it. There's some fascinating stories, and best of all, maybe go up and visit where you'll get a firsthand look at everything. So again, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to all for tuning in. And we hope to see you next week when we're back to our regular coverage. Thanks again. Bye now.